Welcome to the Visually Hidden Selects podcast, where we discuss an independent approach to the art of cinema and explore the subtext of various featured films. My name is Peter O'Brien, and I am an independent filmmaker, author, and musician. Stephen Bendler and Anne Millville are currently on hiatus, but like the Empire, they will strike back. Fortunately, today I am joined by two exceptional guest commentators. First up, we have Mr. Johnny No Keys, who you may remember from such films as Misery Loves Company, and Miss Louise Lynch. Johnny, he's a musician and he's a rocker, but he is also a tried and true cinephile. This is the only guy I have ever seen buy movies, a stack of movies, at a gas station. That's how hardcore he is, all right? He raises the bar for everybody in that realm. And Louise is, of course, also a musician, and she's worked on some of the visually hidden films. She is a co-composer and solo composer. And she also is a scientist, so she kind of takes a more analytical approach to just about everything. So I'm very excited to discuss today's film with them. Today's film, of course, is Conan the Barbarian from 1982, directed by John Milius and starring Arnold Schwarzenegger, Sandahl Bergman, Gerry Lopez, and James Earl Jones. Now, if you have not seen Conan the Barbarian, I strongly encourage you to head on over to the Visually Hidden YouTube channel. Subscribe so you don't miss any future recommendations. Check out our video, watch the film, and come on back to the podcast because we will be discussing it openly with spoilers. Here we go. Conan the Barbarian is a film that has kind of been there our entire lives. We're all from the 80s, and this film is right there at the beginning, 1982. And for me, growing up, it was always mixed in with Destroyer, which is a totally different animal, but Destroyer was much more kid-friendly, so they would play it on television like every weekend. It would be on WPIX New York, Channel 11, and you could catch Destroyer. So for me, growing up, they were kind of indistinguishable. Like, I just knew it was Conan, and I knew who Arnold was because of everything else that came after Conan. But for me, it wasn't really until I was a little bit older and I was really into studying films and filmmakers and writers. And for me, at the top of that list is John Milius. I mean, he is just a very underrated filmmaker, and Conan the Barbarian is just head and shoulders above so many other films in its genre, and not just action and adventure or sword and sorcery, but drama as well. You know, this film has a lot to offer, and it's something that I came to appreciate more as an adult. And the more I watch it, the more I want to keep watching it because it is just such a fun adventure. As the wizard says in the introduction, these are the days of high adventure.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I remember watching both movies growing up and thinking they were both great. You know, as you get older, you realize that they were definitely made by two different filmmakers. Conan the Barbarian is a very serious movie in comparison, whereas The Destroyer has, you know, Bob from Batman's character. I forget what his name is, Tracy something, but he's like more of the like jester in the film, and there's a lot more humor and stuff to that film. And they kind of, I don't like the fact that they made Conan more of like a drunken weirdo in that movie. Like he was played perfectly in the first John Milius film, where he's like the strong silent type. There's not much dialogue, and it's really impressive how he can carry the whole film without saying very much at all. And just his facial expressions and everything and his actions, you really got to step back and appreciate that.
Yeah, even in The Road Warrior with Mel Gibson, I think he only has like, I don't know, less than 30 lines of dialogue in that movie. And he's the same kind of deal, you know, he's actually acting. You know, and you don't need dialogue. Like hundreds of silent films out there that are tremendous.
Mm-hmm.
And I think with Destroyer, they were really trying to piggyback off of the success of He-Man, which was really the failed Conan toy line because they couldn't make toys for an R-rated movie. So then they developed the He-Man mythology, and then they wanted a piece of the action, or Dino De Laurentiis wanted a piece of the action. So I feel like they watered down Destroyer to just take advantage of the He-Man craze among young children. But yeah, I don't like how they changed the character of Conan specifically.
I have to say, I'm in bliss because I didn't see the second one. so I'm not familiar with how Conan was portrayed there. I wanted to add, I did not see Conan the Barbarian until I was an adult, probably with you, Peter. And I've always liked fantasy and I've always liked science fiction. So right from the start, it has a really strong opening with the music and there's fire. And of course, I love the Nietzsche line, what doesn't kill us makes us stronger. Personally, I like the version that we hear nowadays, what doesn't kill you will mutate and try again. And I feel like that's really applicable to this film because there's a lot of things that try to kill him and others, and not all of them are successful. There is one movie, though, that I grew up with, The Wind and the Lion, which is also written and directed by John Milius. And so it's not a surprise to me that I like Conan the Barbarian as much as I do, because there's also that strong opening sequence in that film. And there's also like a group of people taking over another group of people. And you also have that strong male and female lead.
Yeah, so the same desert was used in The Wind and the Lion and the desert scenes in Conan the Barbarian. So
Oh, no way.
there's another correlation, similarity there.
Yeah, and I also like how they're both kind of, I mean, The Wind and the Lion stars Sean Connery, and of course Conan stars Arnold, but both characters, Conan and Rasuli, they're kind of warrior poets in their own way.
Yeah.
You know, and I think John Milius himself is a warrior poet.
Yeah, you know what? The Razuli, though, he talks a bit more, I think, than Conan. I don't know if Conan
Well,
would be a
he's a bit more outspoken,
yes.
but I think inside Conan has great feelings that we will only speculate on because of the change in character and then the decimation of the series.
Right.
Well, he doesn't speak much in the beginning, but he went through a lot of traumatic things.
Yeah, and right in the beginning, too, I feel like I think of young Conan and what happens to him and what he witnesses with his mom. And it's like every parent's nightmare, right? That your child is that young and left behind. So that's a good point. I mean, he was chained up to a wheel for his childhood, essentially. So
Yeah.
what is there to say?
Yeah, and you saw, like, which is also another brilliant part of the film, showing the passage of time there and the changing of the seasons. And you just see some of the shots are so great in this film. Like, you just see those thighs and those legs, and then you see them getting bigger, and then you see less and less legs near him. And then eventually it's just this massive guy pushing the wheel of pain by himself. And then he looks up and you see who it is, and you're like, holy cow.
Right. Right. So no companionship, no parents. No,
Yeah.
I mean the kid essentially that chained him to the wheel, that's who comes back for him, right?
Yeah, the red-haired guy was there chaining him,
Right.
and it shows him they made sure to, with the continuity, to give him the same, cowl and stuff, the black, like, ostrich feathers or whatever they are. And then you see him later on with the beard and whatever.
I love how it all ties into Thulsa Doom at the end as well, when he's talking to Conan and he's like, come, my son, if I'm not your father now, then who is? Like, I made you, and it's like, yeah, by putting him on the wheel of pain, he gave him that focus and that determination. And it was just through that, and I guess his own genetics, that he survived the wheel of pain and survived the trials and tribulations of his gladiator days, and then found his way back to Thulsa Doom. It's really, you've seen revenge stories like this before, but I feel like this one, it stands out really because of the villain, Thulsa Doom, and because of the story and the way it's set up and the way it's executed. I can't think of another one like it. I mean, there are similar themes, or there are similar settings, or, the whole sword and sorcery genre, but none of them come off as well as this one. And I really think it's a John Milius experience. That's one of his strengths as a filmmaker, is action sequences and story and writing.
Yeah, and that's one thing I like about the beginning, too. It's really strong. They have just a few moments to really establish the family. I love, like, the darkness of the introduction and the music that's, like, beating in the beginning, so you're in for a good time. Right from the start, it has a strong first impression. And I love the mom in the beginning, too, because she could have run away. She could have hid. And she was like the last one standing after everybody was slaughtered. And she had a death that was more honorable even than the father, who got taken down by dogs. But I loved her short time in the film was pretty powerful. I appreciated her character and her presence.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's really kind of a tip of the hat to Milius and his brilliance is, he had a short amount of time with these characters, William Smith, who played his father, and his little teaching of Conan in the beginning. It's one of the best opening sequences ever. You see the actual blacksmithing of a sword, and everybody helps out on it.
Mhm.
You know, his father's making the sword, his mother is doing the grip for the sword, and especially, like you said, the mother didn't run. She was there, she had her own sword
Mhm.
and was ready to defend her family to the end. It kind of shows you that these are a strong people.
That opening sequence really resonates throughout the rest of the film. Like with young Conan, you can see like his mother doesn't say a word
Mhm.
throughout the whole opening. Like the father gives him the speech, but the mother is kind of a strong silent type. And then later on, when he meets Valeria, there's this other like strong, beautiful, blonde warrior. And it ties into that whole like, like you kind of marry your parent kind of a thing, where it's like you're attracted to the people that were most caring to you. So I think the way the opening is executed is very clean and very strong. And I love how it just resonates throughout the rest of the film through the character, but also through the story and the connections that are made.
Yeah. And the strong
Mhm.
swelling score, too, that just really complements that opening, makes it very powerful.
I think Basil Polidorus' score for this film, it's definitely one of my top 10 film scores of all time because it does what a score is supposed to do. It heightens the story that's happening through the images. It tells the story musically that's being told through the images. So they just complement each other tremendously well. And that opening cue, Anvil of Crom, is everything that you're going to experience in this film in the opening theme. It's strong, it's heavy, but then it has these light melodies that kind of drift in and out and this like beauty. And then it comes back strong. And it's almost like the beginning of the song is coming for revenge at the end of the song, And it just kind of bookends, kind of like the story where Conan has this experience, but then he finds friendship and he finds love and he finds wisdom on his warrior's journey, and then he gets his revenge at the end because of everything that happened in the middle. And that's kind of what this opening theme does as
Yeah.
well.
It almost, in that whole opening sequence, in that score, tells you the entire movie. Like, you hear the tough opening, the attack of the village, you hear the friendship, the love, the traveling together, then back to the revenge and the mission.
And then it's just developed further throughout. I
Yeah,
really just love this score.
it's one of the few I bought on CD. There's not too many scores that I really own, but that's definitely one.
I love the cue when Conan and Subutai are just running.
I still break into that melody just at randomly walking around the house or doing things.
That's awesome.
You know, it's haunting and it stays with you forever in a good way.
I love how that theme, it's first introduced really when they're running, but then it comes back later on when Conan is crucified on the Tree of Woe and Subutai comes running out through the dunes. So that's kind of almost like his theme, and it's not exactly like the friendship theme, but it is the friendship theme of this movie. I'm calling it right now. You can quote me. That's another great part of this score is that everything is interwoven the way it should be. When you think of films like Star Wars or Lord of the Rings, how masterful the music is in those movies and how much the music lifts and elevates that movie. I feel like if this movie didn't have the score, it probably wouldn't be as impactful and as effective.
Oh, yeah. It rounds it out. Like, you realize how much power that music has. And it makes you realize they don't really score films like this anymore.
Yeah, and I feel like this one in particular, a lot of people, they like to think of John Williams, and I'm not taking a single fucking molecule away from that man. I mean, he earned everything he has, reputation and all, body of work. But a lot of people just like to think of him in terms of orchestral scores and like being a master, and really there's a handful of people who can deliver, and I feel like Basil Polidorus, he's right up there with Williams and Danny Elfman, Howard Shore, Ennio Morricone, Jerry Goldsmith, of course.
Yeah.
Has a very diverse body of work. And Basil, I mean, I think he just he should get more accolades. I know he's passed away, so he didn't have the longevity of some of these other guys, but I feel like Conan is definitely a standout in his career as well as especially contemporary cinema.
To kind of go back to what we were saying about how Conan's dialogue is a little bit lower, I also liked one of the first times when they're meeting after they've gotten the Eye of the Serpent and all of the gems, and he's just looking at her. You can just see that he's just taken with her, and she's of course, possessed with the gems and looking at them. But that's another moment too, where like it doesn't have to be spelled out. If you just watch the actors, they don't have to say it all.
Yeah, and she sees it, and you can see that. Like, no one had to spell it out for you. You see the look in her eyes, and there's a lot of that in this movie. Such brilliance, just everywhere, and you pick up more and more as you watch it every time.
And I've heard a lot of people say like, oh well, yeah, they cast Arnold Schwarzenegger and like he doesn't talk a lot because he couldn't speak well back then.
That's the character. The character doesn't say much because he's used to being alone. Like who is he going to talk to? And who's going to hear his feelings of this deep, traumatic melancholy that he's been carrying around?
Basically living a life of PTSD.
Yeah.
Like he is like perpetually in shock from the devastation that Thulsa Doom rained down on his village and his people.
So people that say like, oh, well, he didn't talk much because of the accent and he couldn't speak English. No, those are people that don't know what they're talking about because
I feel like it was just a beautiful coincidence that this came along for him because he wasn't like struggling. He was already a millionaire from real estate investments. He wanted to make the movies he wanted to make and he wanted to be a leading man. And really Conan was the ideal springboard for him to get to that level of his next career as a movie star outside of bodybuilding.
Yeah, he has a degree in business, so it's not like he's just a musclehead. Like he took more acting lessons so that he could do more with the facial expressions and all that stuff.
Yeah, and he's never really treated like a human once he's taken until he's freed. And even then, he doesn't even know how to be one. So I think it is an interesting criticism about the amount of dialogue because, he's like livestock. Even in that like wonderful scene where he recites what is good in life, he's like a puppy who is like asked, like, give me a paw. Speak. And he barks and says what he's supposed to say.
Yeah, it shows that's all he knows.
Right.
You know what I mean?
So what is he going to say? Yeah. And nobody would listen to him anyway.
Another, I think, standout feature of this film are the effects.
Yes.
It's all practical effects. It's 1982. There is no false hope of CGI. It's all tangible. You can reach out and touch it. Like that snake, like he fucking hacks his head off.
Yeah, they really made a 34-foot snake, animatronic, that they use jet parts for, like hydraulic rams they use that could push 90 tons or something.
Oh, wow.
They wanted it to be able to push around Arnold Schwarzenegger and be able to wrap around. And he takes the first hack and it goes deep into the flesh. And you see all the blood come down and the flesh split open. And then the second one takes the head off. But it's like, how did they do that? It's just so impressive. It was a 34-foot snake that they built for that. But the special effects coordinator, Nick Alder, he worked on Alien. So... they had somebody good doing it.
Yeah, it shows, man. The creatures are great, and of course the fighting and the kills and everything. But even the production design of this film, like they actually built all the stuff. They built the Wheel of Pain. They built the village. They built Thulsa Doom's palace. It's not just a 6-foot high set wrapped in green screen or blue screen.
Yeah.
There's depth to it. There's weight to it.
Yeah.
There's spatial elements involved. And then the lighting comes into play and it ties into the cinematography and then the staging and the blocking for the actors to move around in it. It's all part of like the big picture of filmmaking. And it really is right there for you to see in this one.
Yeah, they built 57 interior and exterior sets for this film in Spain. 57. Created by film production designer Ron Cobb, who did designs for Star Wars and Aliens. And Mount Doom was 130 steps, and it was 90 feet high, built into the side of the mountain. And they actually set the village on fire, and they set Mount Doom on fire, which was a $250,000 set.
It's one of those things that I think audiences take for granted.
Yeah.
Somebody actually built that. Somebody conceived of it and then drew it and then modeled it and then they built it and it worked and it functioned and it did all of these different things for the time it had to, including burn. And now it's preserved in this film. That's one thing I really love about film is no matter what you do, you can contribute to a film. Whether you're really good at cooking, you can do catering. You know, if you're really good with your hands, you can do carpentry and build sets, electricians or lighting or plumbing. All of the trades are involved, and then all of the arts are involved, from wardrobe, makeup, illustration, and as of the last, 35, 40 years, computers as well. So that's one thing that I really love about film and cinema is how it just kind of incorporates everything.
I love fire in the film too. So like whoever the fire guys or gals or people were, I love how even as a theme, whenever his life changes or a big event happens, there's always fire there. So we talked about the village. I also love the fire that lights up the cave when he finds the armor and the sword. And then when the witch kind of gives him his direction, like it was probably a wire, I'm assuming, but like goes through the cave and there's sparks going off and everything. And her like powder that she throws onto the fire. And then when he buries Valeria on the mountain where no fire will burn and there's just like explosions up there. I love all the fire in this film. Somebody had fun.
Yeah, and you don't see that stuff anymore. You don't see actual fire in movies anymore. It's all CGI nowadays. And it's that much more striking when you go back and watch a film like this. Like, I'll even go back and watch movies that were like mediocre in the 80s and 90s. And then you go back and you're watching, you'd be like, did you see that stunt where that man drove off the dock and the guy barely, the truck almost slammed right onto him in the water. He bailed from the truck. I'm like, those are real stunts. Those are real people. Like, you don't see that anymore. That would be CGI people in a CGI van going off the cliff. And, the water might even be CGI too, like you don't see that stuff anymore. Schwarzenegger and Sandahl, Bergman, and Superdye, all of them did 95% of their own stunts.
Yeah.
Just so that they can get more of a realistic angle. Because when you have stunt doubles, you obviously have to film everything from behind, or you're limited to what angles you can actually get. But they did 95% of their stunts, even the dangerous ones, so that they can get any angle. And it adds to the realism, which I think was what Milius and everybody involved in it was dedicated to. They wanted to create the real Hyborian age, like this was a real thing that existed in time, that there was really Sumerians and Vanir that attacked his village, and that these were real people that existed in a real time.
And now a word from our sponsor.
This podcast is brought to you by Visually Hidden Selects. If you're looking for a spoiler-free recommendation of a classic film with professional analysis and insight, check out Visually Hidden Selects, exclusively on the Visually Hidden YouTube channel.
I really, really love Subotai. I think he's just a fantastic character, and I love Gerry Lopez, how he's really a professional surfer and just friends with John Milius, and so he just brought him into this movie. To me, he's kind of the heart of the film. He's especially Conan's heart, which is why he cries for Conan, because Conan is Sumerian and he can't cry, but
He won't cry.
I love that scene.
That's why I cry.
Yeah, there's so much beauty in their relationship as friends, like their friendship. I always love, we talked about it before, the scene when they first meet and then they're just running to civilization. That's one of my favorite parts, is just watching them run through the wilderness together, because it's like, okay, yeah, Conan finally has some type of companion in his life.
He's not alone in this world anymore.
Yeah. And the way Subotai like introduces him to everything and leads him through the village, it's like, it tastes good. It's like, you don't know how long it's been there, You
have no idea how long it's been there.
Yes. He's just trying to help his new friend navigate this strange new world. Even the way he comes for him on the Tree of Woe, and at first Conan, you think maybe he's hallucinating because he goes below the dune and the music drops out.
Yeah.
But then it kicks back in and he's actually there and he brings him back. It's like that.
And he's running.
Yeah, that relationship to me is almost more beautiful than that of Conan and Valeria. Simply because with Conan and Valeria, of course, there's a physical attraction to him. Like with Subotai, it's really just a genuine like sense of purpose, and sense of personal fulfillment, not so much a physical fulfillment. It's like Subotai doesn't have to stick around and he doesn't have to rescue him,
Yeah, he could have taken his money and his gems and been like, all right, I'm out, bro.
Yeah.
You did this to yourself. You went back on your own. You know,
Yeah.
And I think it's cool that
He's
he
cool.
was I think it was cool that the actor was a surfer, or that he was natural. He was natural at acting. And I like the chemistry between them, because you do have like Arnold, who's just a massive force to be reckoned with. I do love how they kind of found each other. And I just like how little Subotai is. I identify with that too. Like, he's feisty and he's small.
It also ties into the riddle of steel and how steel is strong, but it's only as strong as the person who wields it. And Conan, he has these weaknesses. Yes, he is physically strong, but Subotai has stuff that Conan doesn't have.
He doesn't have a rope.
Valeria has stuff that Conan and Subotai don't have. So the way that they all complement each other, they really are a family. You know, they become this surrogate family. And then when the wizard comes into the picture as well, he kind of just rounds them out.
The father figure.
Yeah, and also just even in a supernatural way, the way Thulsa Doom is a sorcerer and he has these mystical powers. Well, now they got a fucking wizard in their back pocket, you know, like they're unstoppable.
Yeah. They can bring Conan back from the dead there.
That scene is really Valeria's. I think that's her scene. And when she goes to defend him and fight off the demons that are coming for him, which are also just, they're animations, but they're really cool animations. And they look unique to this film and this world. You know, it's not overly cartoony. You know, it's a simple little effect. And of course, today with the fucking MCU and Avengers and everything, like, you wouldn't have that without this. And I think it's a really great example of the stepping stone of visual effects, you know, because at that point, it's not special effects. Those are visual effects, and it's just a very effective use of them.
I think the scene where they are trying to save Conan, you know, it's Subotai who gets them there, and then Valeria who gets him to the wizard and like demands that he helps and is willing to pay any price. I think one thing that stands out about that is that the two of them, Subotai and Valeria, kind of challenge the lesson that Conan's father gave him, because it's a beautiful lesson. It's a beautiful scene in the very beginning with father talking to his son and imparting his wisdom. But one of the things he tells him is that you can only trust steel. And so I like here that they're the example against that. Even if Subotai got Conan to Valeria, she could have just looked at him and be like, no, he's goner. You know, like, I am gonna take these gems and move on. But, you know, she put her life on the line and pays the price for that. And so I don't know what that is if not trust. And they fight them with their bare hands, you know? They fight those demons with their bare hands.
Yeah, you're right. Hey, Dad, that was good advice, but you weren't 100% right there.
I love that Valeria is stronger than Conan in that way. You think of like the man sacrificing himself for the damsel, and it's a role reversal, kind of the way Conan's, again, the parallel. Conan's mother sacrificed herself to protect him, and it comes back around with Valeria. You know, yes, again, Conan is physically strong and imposing, but Valeria has these different strengths, and she has, you know, we don't know anything about her. Like, we don't follow her adventure up to this point, but through her character and through her actions, we know everything we need to about her. And I think that's really good writing and really good character development, that they can just step into the frame, like, you know, a third of the way into the movie and have such an impact on the story and the characters. Again, it ties back into John Milius as the writer, director, and of course casting Sandahl Bergman, but I think it's her performance as well. Not everybody could have played Valeria because she really had the acting skills for this particular film and story, and she had the physical skills being a dancer. She moves with this like kind of elegance and gracefulness, and, you know, I don't think Meryl Streep could have played Valeria.
I love this character. I love Conan, but I think what I love about this film is Valeria. And I love her introduction. Like, that's one of a line that we use a lot. You don't even have a rope. I love her humor. And I think earlier you said that the wizard was the brains. I think he's wisdom. I think she's the brains of the operation. She's very practical. I love that she's not in heels. At least I don't think she is. Like, that's always a pet peeve of mine when a woman is doing stunts in stilettos, and like, that has its place or whatever, but she's just really practical, and she is still stunning. And yes, like, you know, she's in her little outfits, but so are the dudes. You know, she's not any less bared than they are. They're all very, very physical. And I love, like, when they get the princess, from Thulsa Doom, and Conan's running with her over the shoulder, and Subadai's kind of his backup, and she's behind a bit, and she's just slaying everybody. Like, and I love it, like there's like the two guys that come at her, and she's in her battle pose, but then she holds the sword and just taps it on the palm of her hand. She's like, I got this. Like, I love her confidence. And then she comes back from the afterlife to save Conan. And she's just stunning and incredible. And the big goon, she stops him. Like, I love her character.
Yeah, she's wonderful. She's probably one of the first women I've ever fallen in love with on
awesome.
film. And still to this day, she still hovers in the back of my mind, as a standard of comparison. That's the great thing about this film. They didn't go out of their way to like put her in some sort of super impractical costumes. Like, the costumes are all greatly made and in great detail, but it also shows off the physicality of these athletes that he chose for this film. So it showcases their physical attributes in a way that's like, hey, look, they're in really great shape and they could be these characters.
You know what? In a lot of American-made films, when there's a female lead who's attractive, it seems like it's common for their sexuality to be one of the tools that they use. And correct me if I'm wrong, but she just battles. She never has to like pucker or lure anybody in. Like, she's just her and she's kicking butt. And so I wish there were more characters like that in modern films. Like, I love the Marvel movies, but a lot of times that's always like pushed in at some point. Or you have a female character where they have to like down your throat establish that they are strong, and that doesn't come up in this film. And I like that she can just be her, and she's just strong, and she is attractive, and she's a warrior, and like the end. I really appreciate that about her.
Yeah, I always like that myself. She is as capable as anybody else in the trio, and it's a very attractive quality. And just like his mom was a strong female character without being a girl boss or anything, this is just a strong woman who's just awesome. She's just such a charismatic character. Like, nowadays, it seems like they try to tell you this character is strong, or try to convince you in other ways that this female is a strong female character, or this character is a strong character. There's none of that. There's no convincing that has to be done, because you see it in a very natural way.
A lot of times today, it definitely feels heavy-handed, or it's like shoehorned in there with the character, and it's just so natural here. And that's just John Milius doing his thing as a historian and as a storyteller, and just an appreciator of strength in humanity. It's not about gender at all. Like, these are just people and what they're capable of.
And I think it's also impressive that all of these actors were on board with, they were all trained in Kendo, which is Japanese sword fighting, for 4 months before they started filming, which is why all the sword play and all the sword fighting is very believable from all the characters.
Speaking of well-trained characters or well-trained actors, and we're talking about all the heroes here, but they wouldn't be as heroic if they didn't have a great villain.
Yeah.
And Thulsa Doom and James Earl Jones as Thulsa Doom, whoever put that idea in the casting director's head.
Yeah, crazy.
And James Earl Jones, the performance that he gives, you really only get this from watching the movie a couple of times, but it's very generous to his other actors. What he's giving them to react to is the best possible experience an actor can have. Like, he's doing his job so well that Arnold, who has not been acting very long, doesn't have to work as hard, because James Earl Jones is working at full capacity, and Arnold just has to react to what's happening from James Earl Jones.
I remember seeing him for the first time when I watched this movie. He used to creep me the hell out. Just that haircut. I don't think he even blinks in the film at all.
I know.
And just that one part where his eyes get a little wider and he's like, they will all drown in lakes of blood. And you're like, Jesus Christ. I don't know. When this revenge comes, I don't know if we're going to survive this one. Like, just that hypnotic stare when he kills Conan's mom totally stays her hand from striking him.
Yeah, it gets
You're
real.
like,
everything gets real there.
He's a very charismatic villain.
And very intelligent.
The physical attributes of the character, the hair, which is like stick straight, silky, long, and the blue eyes, the black skin, those are physical clues that something about this character is unique
Yeah.
and to be watched and to pay careful attention to. And, in his introduction, he doesn't utter a syllable. It's all through the performance and the eyes.
Yep.
But then when Conan is being interrogated by Thulsa Doom and being chastised for breaking into his house and stealing his possessions and murdering his pets, and that is what grieves him.
That's what grieves me the most.
That whole lecture, that's really his big introduction scene.
Yeah.
Where Conan has been beaten to a bloody pulp. He really just delivers.
I think they do a good job paying tribute to the actual folklore and the source material. Like the Stygians worship the god Set, which is and you hear them talk about this stuff and actual places in the worlds of Conan that Robert E. Howard wrote. And the Stygians, they were kind of like a dark-skinned people that were very strange. And they're almost described as being kind of like serpent but kind of demonic looking. Like when you read about them, you're kind of like, these are some creepy looking fucking people. So it kind of makes you wonder if he's one of them, because he's just, like you said, he has a very striking appearance that nobody else in the film looks anything like him, really. And then the snake arrows that he makes,
those are so awesome.
And especially that one part when he shoots Valeria with it.
Yeah.
And then you see Arnold actually pull a real snake out of her.
Yeah, that was really good.
And you're like, oh my God.
Yeah, and I don't know that I have any criticisms of this film. I think it's pretty honest in the beginning what kind of story you're going to get and what it's going to feel like and sound like. There are some things that I don't know if they intended for them to be funny, but I appreciate them as comic relief.
Like when he punches the camel.
Oh, that poor camel.
When he bumps into it when he's drunk.
That always cracks me up. And then the witch scene, like when she's crawling around and she throws whatever it is she throws into the fire behind her, and it kind of like spiffs up a bit. Like that always makes me chuckle. And I know for Conan, he's scared, which makes sense. And then the vulture, when he kills the vulture with his teeth, it was a realistic looking vulture, but it is just like so crazy. It just does make me chuckle. So I don't know if that was the intention, but on my side, I'm kind of glad for a little bit of comic relief.
Well, I think it's also those things are of the time. And I'm not talking about 1982. It's part of that realism that they're trying to establish of the Hyborian age. And so to us, it seems a little comical because we would never encounter a witch or a succubus and, have to pleasure her for information. That's something that to us, would be comical, but it's establishing the world of Conan.
Yeah, but you could still dream.
There were films kind of like this before, the Sword and Sorcery, Jason and the Argonauts, and even Clash of the Titans was like around this time. Yeah. But again, this one stands for me above those in terms of story and execution. Like Jason and the Argonauts, of course, those are classics. Yeah. And for their time, especially the skeleton fight. And you can see that influence in this movie, but you can see the influence of this movie in so many other things that came after it, not including Destroyer or even Red Sonja, but films like Legend and Willow and Lady Hawk, and even Xena Warrior Princess. And I'm even going to say Lord of the Rings when you get down to it with the practicality and those details of creating that world in a very practical way and those creatures in a practical way and all the armor and the weapons. It's like, you wouldn't have Lord of the Rings as a film without Conan the Barbarian.
Yeah, because you see there's a lot of parallels there. The attention to detail in Lord of the Rings and the making of the custom weapons that they all made. They made all the armor and did all the makeup individual for all these people and the Uruk-hai. Just the dedication to making all the different races of dwarves and elves and everything. I'd be very shocked if there wasn't a citation of Conan the Barbarian as an influence on that. because they really seem to follow that example of the realism and the attention to detail and creating a realistic world that's believable, that it could have actually happened in prehistory or was a real place or a real people or a real world that existed somewhere.
And I was going to say too that I wish that there was more of a legacy for the treatment of Valeria's character in female characters in more modern films. But now that I think about it, like Lord of the Rings would be a good example of female characters that are strong, they're sword bearing, they don't back down, and they don't have to use those like wiles that are used in other films. So I'm glad you brought Lord of the Rings up in particular. And I think it's because if there's examples of that in previous filmmaking and all that attention to detail and actually doing some of those special effects, then somebody's left a trail of breadcrumbs for other filmmakers.
Yeah, definitely. I like the little subtle things that you see in the film that kind of show you where he's at and show you a little bit of the changes in Conan. Like he always had that Wheel of Pain necklace around his neck. And then all of a sudden, like that was his family. That was all he knew. And then when she dies, he rips it off and he puts her necklace that he made for her, the Eye of the Serpent, around. Like, this is who I am. This is who I represent. This is my family. This is who I'm fighting for.
I hadn't really put that together. That's awesome.
And also in the beginning, when they behead his mom, just that whole shot on him as a young kid holding his mom's hand, and then you just see the head and the hair come down. So many great shots that are just gut-wrenching, that bring all these emotions out of you, that connect you to these characters almost right away. You don't have any of that anymore in films nowadays. You don't feel anything for a lot of these characters. So for John Milius and Oliver Stone and the people that wrote this movie and that executed this movie and the actors, it really pulls you in and takes your heart with you for this whole story.
I think a lot of the genius is evident in the shot you just described, where the mom's hair falls through the frame and then the body falls away, but then the reverse where they show the hand and young Conan's face and then you see Thulsa Doom. It's like that right there is the entire movie in one edit. Like right there, and like that, like those two frames that they set up is everything you need to understand this film and appreciate it. And just the simple, effective way that they executed it, no pun intended, is phenomenal.
Yeah.
I like the hope of this film that it offers, that Conan was a slave and a dog or less and was able to trust, and that the three of them found each other and could trust each other and rise above their circumstances. We don't know much about Valeria, but Conan certainly rose above his circumstances. And I was listening to what you were talking about, Johnny, earlier about how, gosh, I wish we could have had the trilogy that we deserved, right? But I love that scene of Conan in the end, where he's the king and it's in the future. And gosh, it would have been good to have more films of this caliber. But I love that. That's a line that kind of rings in my ears a lot. Do you want to live forever? And kind of, especially when Valeria mentions that there were many times when she faced death and there was no one there to witness. So it's just, there's just a lot in this for friendship and for companionship and hope and rising above and living forever.
That will about do it for us here today at the Visually Hidden Selects podcast. We will be discussing a completely different film next time, so be sure to head over to our YouTube channel and subscribe so you don't miss any future recommendations. You can catch Johnny No Keys playing with Troublebound here, there, everywhere. Louise Lynch's musical work can be heard on Spotify. Just do a quick name search and you'll find her toot sweet. If not, you can check her out through the Visually Hidden projects. And of course, you can catch me over on Instagram as well as Letterboxd and find out what I've been watching and see what I think. And until next time, oil the sword and feed the horse.
Pack a rope.